I was on Hinge for just a couple of months and matched with one of the profiles. Seemed like a nice guy. It escalated to him asking if I knew about cryptocurrency. He said he ran a studio on the side that did some currency exchanges, and I ended up taking all my savings, even tapping into my IRA. We're talking like $300,000.
Okay. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. It still to this day, a year and a half later, boggles my mind that I could be victim to a scam, especially of this financial magnitude. That seems incongruous with the image I had of myself.
You've probably noticed that online scams are everywhere. You see them on job recruitment sites, in your text messages, on dating apps, and across social media. And while people are getting better at spotting these scams, scammers are constantly advancing too. Arguably the most hurtful, personal, and financially damaging of these scams is romance scams, a type of investment scam where the perpetrator spends weeks or months getting to know the victim until ultimately conning them out of as much money as they can get. So what's it really like when you fall victim to one of these scams? How do they fool you? And how much money can you really lose? Today, we'll do a deep dive into relationship scams and speak with Evelyn, who experienced this firsthand. This is Incognito Mode. In 2024, cybercriminals stole over $1 trillion from unsuspecting targets around the world. Americans were by far the biggest victims of cyber scams, losing an average of $3,500 per incident, more than double the losses reported in China. The fastest growing scams are investment scams, which grew nearly 40% year over year. These scams are based on gaining the victim's trust. Most investment scams begin with an attacker cold contacting people through texts, social media, dating, and other communication platforms. You've probably gotten these texts before. They'll often simply say hi or something like, "Hey Josh, it was fun catching up last week." If the recipient responds to say that the attacker has the wrong number, the scammer seizes the opportunity to strike up a conversation. To do this at scale, criminals will often message hundreds of Facebook users at a time or match with every profile on a dating app. This is very similar to what happened to Evelyn, who asked to appear under a pseudonym. Wired's Joel Khalili was the first to report Evelyn's story in 2023.
I am a 50-year-old woman living in Los Angeles. At the time of the scam, I was 48 and had just gotten out of a long 20-year relationship. The breakup came out of nowhere for me, completely unraveled my life. I had been not working, I had an early retirement, I had to up and move out of the house we had been living in for 20 years. And start all over, completely all over in my personal life, in my career. I was stressed out financially, and so I wasn't feeling great. I was on Hinge for just a couple of months and matched with one of the profiles. His name said Bruce, and we started chatting. We exchanged pleasantries and talked about what kind of movies do you like? What kind of things do you like to do? Just like the basic get to know you kind of things. Seemed like a nice guy and quickly became very, I guess, via text, affectionate, saying, "I really like chatting with you. I don't want to be chatting with anyone else," like that kind of thing. He said he lived in Sunnyvale in California and that he also had a second home in Beverly Hills.
Okay, how did that make you think about him, feel about him when you learned he has two homes in California? Presumably he's pretty well off, it sounds like.
Yeah, even his few profile pics kind of gave off the vibe that he had some money. And the second home was more important in that it anchored him also in Los Angeles, because I didn't want to start a long distance relationship.
Right.
So he'll be in town at some point.
At this point, you can probably better understand why Evelyn kept chatting with Bruce. He seems smart, kind, caring, and that's exactly what relationship scams are based on. Basic human feelings like a desire for connection or feeling stressed out about money. Knowing this, it's no surprise that since the pandemic, fraud has reached epidemic levels.
They hit a record high in 2021, with people losing something like $550 million, up nearly 80% from the year before.
A rise in social isolation and more online interactions created a perfect breeding ground for online scams. Gareth Norris, a lecturer in psychology at Aberystwyth University, published a paper in 2019 on the psychology of internet fraud. According to Norris, scams in the digital age are much more effective because they happen behind a screen. Behavior that might normally raise suspicion, sweating or fidgeting, is concealed. Not only that, but scammers have become experts at manipulating human psychology. David Modic, a professor of computer and information science at the University of Ljubljana, says the chances that someone will fall for a scam has no connection with intelligence. Rather, it's about the ability of the scammer to take advantage of personal context, like a recent breakup, to erode someone's self-control and blind them to the warning signs. Basically, scammers are really good at getting people to do what they want. And once they have you locked in, it can be really hard to notice the warning signs, no matter how intelligent you are or tech savvy you think you may be. At this point, had you only been talking to Bruce via text message, or had there been phone calls or video chats or anything?
Definitely no video chat. Pretty quickly from our chatting on Hinge, he asked if I use WhatsApp. So we did, and that's where all the conversation happened since. And then it escalated to him asking if I knew about cryptocurrency, which I knew some. And then he said he ran a studio on the side that did some currency exchanges and made money, and if I would be interested in putting some money in it, day trading or something, but with cryptocurrency. He led me to a third-party website as far as I knew. The website, I believe, was cegamas.com. I don't know what it stood for. He walked me step by step, sometimes with screenshots, sometimes just telling me like, this is what you do to transfer the money, this is where you put it in. And it looked colorful, but it looked legit. It even had like the footers on the bottom. It had a support chat and, it had all the bells and whistles you would expect. It wasn't like some 1990s website or anything like that.
Right, I understand. When did you start putting money in and how much was that?
I think the first amount was probably like $1,000 or $2,000 because I already had that much in my Coinbase account. It was already like money I didn't consider as having. So I was fine using that as my first transaction money.
It seemed low risk at that point.
Exactly. And so his logic was that, I have a team of people who have been studying the trends and they know when to do the transactions and when it's gonna hit higher. So he would be like, okay, well, the next peak is gonna happen in 2 days or something like that, which I'm sure to a finance person, it would be ridiculous to hear that. But like, there have been so many coins that have been influenced by the news and whatnot. So I thought like, okay, sure.
Where do things go from there?
It made like a couple $100 or something, which was like, okay, I could see that. So that happens a couple more times. And then I said, I want to take some money out because I wanted to make sure I could take money out. He walked me through the steps and it was easy. And I had screen grabbed that process and written down notes on how to do it because I thought I was being smart, figuring things out and like having a just in case emergency plan. And so I was able to withdraw the money.
Do you remember how much you withdrew or if you had any temptation to just take it all out and kind of be done with it, but since you were up already?
Oh, Andrew, if only I had done that. But it's like a gambling person at a casino, I guess, right? When you're up, you just keep on putting in the money. I took the fact that I could take out money as a sign that it was safe.
So how do scammers perform investment fraud? Adrian Sheik, an independent security researcher based in Canada, says the methods used in these scams are almost always the same. A cybercriminal organization develops a template for a fake crypto trading site and, in exchange for a kickback, hands it to other criminal affiliates who perform the scam. Data gathered by Cheek suggests that at least 439 distinct web addresses have been used to host the CEG exchange. It's absolutely textbook, he says. A quick scan of the crypto scam tracker on California's Department of Financial Protection and Innovation website tells a similar story. The scams reported are almost identical. An unsuspecting target meets someone online, on a dating site, messaging app, or similar. After chatting for a while, the person they met brings up the possibility of helping them invest in crypto and introduces them to a trading website or app. Some reported names include Capital Handle System, ICE Crypto Trading App, Topex, and GCC Money. The apps or websites appear trustworthy and may even impersonate the platforms of legitimate financial institutions. Once inside the portal, targets can often see curated real-time market data meant to show the potential of the investment. And once the target funds their investment account, they can start watching their balances grow. So now you've taken some money out. What's your opinion of Bruce? What's the vibe at that moment?
Very friendly still. We were still chatting on a regular basis. And then at some point we had chatted on the phone. He had an accent, but whatever, like people have accents. I didn't think anything of it. Of course, the whole time on the relationship side, I had been wanting to see when he was going to come down to LA so we could meet in person. What I should have at least pushed for is the next step would have been a video chat of some sort. I don't know that would have done anything to change the outcome, but I didn't even do that. And it was always like, oh, in a couple of weeks. And the whole scam didn't last that long, to a point where it was like he kept pushing it back and I was getting like frustrated or anything like that. But it wasn't to a point where I was like, oh, okay, something's up, you're hiding from me. And then he's also pushing to invest more. That part never died down. In fact, it increased, where he was saying like, hey, the more you put in to trade, the higher your return, which again, also makes sense. You need money to make money.
Right.
He eventually wore me down and I ended up taking all my savings and even tapping into my IRA to, I guess, I don't want to say like to appease him, because there was obviously a part of me that wanted to do it. But it eventually got to that point and he succeeded in talking me into putting in all that money into this website and quote unquote trading with it. The fact that I had withdrawn money was like this big green light in front of me in being like, well, you know, you might lose some money. Like let's say the timing was off or something, but you can always take it all out,
right, if
something starts to go south.
So do you remember like how much at that point you were in for between your savings and what you took out of your IRA?
Oh, we're talking like $300,000.
Okay. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it was everything.
Oh, man. How did that go? How did you feel, converting 300,000 actual dollars into cryptocurrency at that point? Were you excited?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was excited. While this is happening, I had asked about his work and he sent me a photo of his office. Like, hey, here are the guys working hard or something like that. Only later, I reverse image searched that photo and realized that it was a 2-year-old photo from someone else's Twitter account.
Oh. And this was after you realized like you'd been had by this guy?
I think so. Or like I was starting to get suspicious. Like it was somewhere in the ramp up. The photo tied to a company that was charged with being fraudulent. And of course that freaked me out. What also freaked me out was the first time I made a big transaction with most of the money, the return on it was some ridiculous amount. I thought, no way, something's up.
And so it wasn't that you lost money, it was that you made so much money that you were like, this can't be real, or why is everyone not just making money this way?
Exactly.
Okay, so in the timeline, we're at this point where you've put in your life savings, you're up a suspicious amount. What happens next from there? I
tried without Bruce to take out all of the money, going through the steps that I had noted and screenshotted, and it didn't work. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I have to do it in smaller chunks. Maybe there's a limit or something. So I tried to take out a little bit of money, like a couple $1,000. It's about the same amount probably that I did before. I still couldn't do it. So then I messaged the support saying like, hey, what's going on? And I get a message back saying, you have to put in 15% of the value of your account to prove that you are legitimate in order to take out the money.
Oh boy. I'm getting stressed just thinking about this moment. Were you freaking out at this point?
Oh yeah, my blood ran cold, and I kept trying without the tech support anymore. Like, no, this isn't happening. First of all, even if that was true, I no longer had 10% of the value of this ridiculously fake amount of money that I now had, allegedly. Yeah. I think it was when I got that information and I turned to Bruce. I said, what is this? Like, what does this mean? Why can't I get any money out? And his response was, oh, didn't I tell you? Like, yeah, that's their policy to weed out the scammers. Yeah. Once he said that, I was like, oh, you're in on this. This is bad. And then he tried to convince me to borrow money to get my money back. So I just stopped communicating with him and just tried to come to grips with what I had done, what I, on my own 2 feet, walked into the bank to do. I still drive by that bank on a regular basis and I inwardly cringe because I did that. And I, for a little bit, could not bring myself to tell anybody. It was so shameful. It was so embarrassing. Mainly it was embarrassing. I did eventually go to the police, the local police, and then I also filled out the FBI digital scam some department of theirs. Like, the police was very upfront and saying, there's nothing we can do because the pictures you have, the information, the phone numbers, like all of that could be fake. In a Hollywood ending, there'd be a duffel bag full of money that they walk out with and hand over to me.
Right.
But none of that happened. And he flat out said, like, the volume, the lack of information that could be true just wasn't there.
So what happens if you try to go to the cops? The likelihood that a victim will get their money back is slim. The only hope lies in tracing the movement of cryptocurrency. An analysis of the movements of the cryptos stolen from Evelyn, conducted by Chainalysis, a firm whose tools are used by law enforcement to inform investigations, reveals the lengths scammers will go to cover their tracks. After Evelyn handed over the crypto, it was divided into different wallets and eventually cashed out through a selection of exchanges based in multiple countries, where it was blended with funds stolen from other victims and converted on multiple occasions into different crypto tokens. Each of these hops is designed to further blur the origin of the funds and limit the likelihood an exchange might identify wrongdoing and freeze the assets. This indicates a high level of organization, says Phil Larot, Director of Cybersecurity Investigations at Chainalysis. The sheer volume of scams like this one, coupled with the lack of resources and technical expertise among law enforcement, means investigations are rare. These scams are extremely hard to investigate, prosecute, and disrupt, says Nicola Staub, a former cybercrime prosecutor and now CEO of security startup Cybera. The estimates vary, but all told, only a minute percentage of victims ever see their money again. Others even get scammed again by recovery scammers who ask for upfront payment in return for helping retrieve lost funds. So, who are these scammers? Pulling off long-term investment scams can take hours of communication and relationship building, and researchers say that criminal organizations develop scripts and playbooks that allow them to offload the work at scale onto inexperienced scammers. And these inexperienced scammers are often victims themselves. Many of them have been subjected to human trafficking and are enslaved at compounds controlled by criminal gangs. In Southeast Asia, for example, it is believed that hundreds of thousands of people have been trafficked to giant scam centers. They're then forced to scam victims abroad and can be beaten or tortured if they refuse or try to leave. A 2022 ProPublica investigation into human trafficking and cyber scamming has also shed light on how victims are smuggled and sold into forced labor. One example is Fan, a 22-year-old from China, In March of 2021, Phong was offered a marketing position with what he thought was a well-known food delivery company in Cambodia. The proposed salary was $1,000 a month and was enticing by local standards. Phong was so excited that he told his older brother about the opportunity, who then quit his job and joined him. By the time they realized that the offer was a sham, it was too late. Their new bosses wouldn't let them leave the compound where they had been put to work. Phong was taken captive in 2021 and sold twice in 2022. Each time he was sold, his new captors raised the amount he'd have to pay to buy his freedom. His debt more than doubled from $7,000 to $15,500 in a country where the annual per capita income is about $1,600. ProPublica also found that human traffickers use apps like Telegram to sell their victims. One ad reads, "Selling a Chinese man in Sihanoukville, just smuggled from China, 22 years old with ID card, typing very slow." The problem of human trafficking is likely to get worse, especially with the dismantling of USAID, as many efforts addressing forced labor compounds that fuel digital fraud like investment scams are being cut. Scammers are often constrained by their language skills and ability to keep up conversations with potentially hundreds of victims at a time in numerous languages. However, AI developments within the last 2 years, including the launch of writing tools like ChatGPT, are making it easier for criminals to break down language barriers and create the content they need for scamming. Perhaps the biggest AI paradigm shift comes from deepfakes. Scammers are increasingly using machine learning systems to allow for real-time face swapping. This technology allows criminals to change their appearance on video calls with their victims, making them realistically appear to be a different person. Such services are a game changer for scammers because they allow attackers to prove to victims in photos or real-time video calls that they are who they claim to be. Stephanie Baroud, a criminal intelligence analyst in Interpol's human trafficking unit, says the impact of AI also needs to be considered as part of an investment scammer's tactics in the recruitment of other scammers. Baroud says the recruitment ads that lure people into being trafficked used to be, quote, very generic and full of grammatical errors. However, AI is making them appear more polished and compelling. It really is making it easier to create a very realistic job offer, she says. Unfortunately, this will make it much more difficult to identify which is the real and which is the fake ads. I'm sure in some of your research or reading some of the coverage of this, you've heard about the scam compounds that are really prevalent in Southeast Asia, and obviously, it seems unlikely we will ever know Bruce's identity, but has it crossed your mind that he might have been, potentially a victim of human trafficking himself and also be not necessarily just a perpetrator in this whole system?
Yeah, I found that out afterwards, that whoever he is himself could be a victim too, just like you said, which complicates it a little bit as far as how I feel about the perpetrator, because I thought I was the only victim in this situation, but to know that somebody is having to do this against their will on that end is so tragic. Yeah. And to me, there's a special place in hell that is reserved for scammers, because you are putting in so much effort just to take from somebody else. Yeah. And that's a lot of brain power that went into creating this scam, creating this fake website, making fake profiles, sourcing all those fake profile photos. It is tremendous amount of work, and all it is to con somebody else out of their hard-earned money.
The criminal enterprises behind these scams run complex logistical operations, both physical and digital. Since beginning in China in the late 2010s, investment scammers have grown in number, and they've begun to spread globally, with scamming infrastructure emerging in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and West Africa. Surprisingly, since 2021, Dubai has emerged as the largest epicenter of investment scams outside of Southeast Asia. At least 6 alleged scam compounds believed to be operating around Dubai have been identified. The research, based on testimony from forced laborers, data leaked from a cyber attack, and social media posts, identified potential compounds around industrial and investment parks. These organized crime groups typically set up in countries where they can take advantage of instability, whether it's poverty, lack of government regulation, limited law enforcement resources, or other favorable factors. Regardless of where these scammers are located, their tactics are all pretty similar, and the results can be devastating for targets around the world.
To this day, about a year and a half out, not a whole lot has changed. And that's very disappointing and also disheartening. I'm worse off financially than before, that's for sure. I am still single, not that that makes or breaks my life, but just in terms of, well, at least in the year and a half, things have turned around. Like, that's not my story. Logistically and financially, every day, think about it and can't believe it happened. That's the main reason why I wanted to do this interview and wanted to do the article in the first place, because I'm very comfortable with technology. I like to think, like I said, I'm a logical, smartish person who knows better than to fall for the Nigerian prince scam. So I thought I was pretty well prepared. I thought I had been following a lot of smart things in like making sure I can withdraw the money, in the fact that the website looked fine, to the naked eye, but yet it still happened to me. And I want people to not be so confident to think like, oh, that was obvious. Like, that would never. Like, that's what I thought too.
So, are there any ways to protect yourself? There's so many scams out there, it's hard to give a one-size-fits-all answer. But some red flags that you can look for are if a stranger contacts you out of the blue and tries to befriend you on a text message that you wouldn't expect. If you meet somebody who starts talking about investing and telling you how to get rich quick. If somebody asks you to send them money or pay for them or send a gift, that's gonna be a red flag. If they ask you to move to a specific platform that's different from the one where you met them, that's also something you gotta watch out for. If something feels off, it probably is, so take a minute to consider what you're doing. If this does happen to you, it's important to talk about it, because the more awareness that comes to this, the more law enforcement can put resources behind combating it, the more people know how to avoid scams, and the harder it is for the scammers to get away with it. This has been Incognito Mode. Until next time.